We're going to pass out resolutions this evening. Mr. Harris and Mr. Sedana were unable to get here due to traffic. Hopefully they will be here in a reasonable amount of time. So if we'd like to get started passing out the resolutions, if everybody could come up front, please. Dr. Zegel, will you please call the names?
Our first group of students we'd like to recognize are our fourth grade elementary students who were selected by their school for the 2018 Veterans Day Essay Contest. From Morby Street, Sophia Costa. From Avenel Street, Michael Komar. From Port Reading, Zoe Luciano. From Ross Street, Bryce Haniff. Ford Avenue, Ethan Lino. From Indiana Avenue, Ishal Saeed. From Menlo Park, Amber Castillo. From Claremont, Natalia Cormier. Oak Ridge Heights, Hunter Savarisi. Lindcrest, Shalak Marwadi. Woodbine Avenue, Rowan Badawa. Lafayette Estates, Abigail Pietrzak. Robert Masenik, Christian Karras. Pennsylvania Avenue, Camila Westcott. Matthew Jago, Japsahej Obi. And Oak Tree Road, Shruti Shamagam. Now we have our third grade students who were recognized for their Veterans Day poster contest. From School 1 from Morby Street, Rusina Cower. From Avenel, Alexandro Presmata. Alexaho Perez Mata from Avenel Street. From Port Reading, Marisol Velasquez. From Port Reading, Michaela La Rosa. I'm sorry, from School 11, Michaela La Rosa. Michaela? From Ford Avenue, Gavin Gary. Indiana Avenue, Krishiv Patel. Menlo Park, Ariana Paredes. Claremont Avenue, Ibrar Khalil. Oak Ridge Heights, Rudra Patel. Lincrest, Dean Wobenhurst. Woodbine Avenue, Afsa Unis. Lafayette Estates, Jordan Rivera. Robert Masenik, Scarlett Staruch. Pennsylvania Avenue, Abigail Chiraboga. Matthew Jago, Alex Sanchez. Oak Tree Road, Jalea Delgado. Now we'd like to recognize our veterans who are here with us tonight. Cuthbert Ashby. Eugene Bernhardt. Stuart Brandow. Edward Carney. Timothy Casey. Jacob Comier. Thomas Kraus. Ronald Cusimano. Ron Davey. Paul DiPaolo. Ray Delleman. Thank you. Matt Donovan. Daniel Dunn. John Eberhardt. Ted Evan. Joseph Formola. John Geraci. Robin Goodrich. Alfred Jankowski. Michael Jarnatoski. Jerry Geiger. Jeffrey Carabin. Ed Landino. Chung Hang Jackie Lee. Vincent Lupiano. John McIntosh. Gerald Malone. Harold Mann. Ed Marzak. Jack McGreevy. Anthony Morella. Jeff Mullins. James Murphy. Charles Murray. Charles Nieder. Charlie Orgelfinger. Raymond Orris. Juan Ortiz. Joe Palaika. Harold Peterson. George Pezzett. Eric Ransom. Johnny Rodriguez. Anthony Romano. Adam Romatowski. Thank you. Howard Saltzman. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Phil Schreiber. Robert Skibar. Kevin Smith. Ernest J. Stukas. Vernon Tatum. Dennis Veth. Edward Van Eckert. Gary White. Clifford Whiteleg. John Wintz. Thank you, sir. And William Wisk. We got more.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know me. I'm ready to go if you need a speaker.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Recently, School 9 was able to get a new school sign thanks to generous donations from our neighbors. We'd like to recognize some of those. Buckeye Partners, we'd like to recognize Robert Hempel and Wayne Egan for their generous donation. Also helping out School 9 to secure their sign was Colonial Pipeline Company, Anthony Ventiglamia. And finally, a generous donation from Prologis. We'd like to recognize Richard Long and Corinne DiChiera. School 19 recently received a generous donation made by the Metro Park Assembly of God Church. We'd like to recognize them and thank them tonight. We have Pastor Leslie Samuel. Five of our staff members were selected to make presentations at the New Jersey Science Convention held in October 23rd and 24th. We'd like to recognize them. Kelly Aker, Stacy Arventes, James Danch, Beth Hegan, and Jess Napolitano. The Junior Reserves Officer Training Corps, JROTC program at Woodbridge High School has earned Honor Unit with Distinction status for the 2018-2019 school year. We'd like to congratulate them, and we'd like to thank our Colonel Thomas Parker and Command Sergeant Major Johnson. Thanks, Colonel. On September 13th, a student from Avenel Middle School suffered a life-threatening medical emergency. Thankfully, John Conyu, our staff member, acted immediately in a crisis situation, utilizing the Heimlich maneuver, and assisted the student who was choking and in distress. We'd like to thank and recognize John Conyu tonight. Mr. Conyu. Diane Lazaruk, a teacher at Isle Middle School, has been selected as one of IXL's Elite 100 teachers for the 2017-2018 school year. Congratulations, Mrs. Lazaruk. The Woodbridge Township Athletic Alumni Association recently held their induction dinner. It's a wonderful organization. We'd like to thank their organizers, Nick Sardone and Mike Kelber. Thanks, Nick. And we have one student who just arrived. Our fourth grade essay winner for Veterans Day from School 9, Zoe Luciano. And that will conclude our resolution portion of this evening. If there's anyone who just arrived or whose name I didn't call, or if there is any type of typo on your resolution, you can see either myself or Ms. Rooney, and we'll get that squared away for you. But thank you to all, congratulations, and God bless our veterans. Thank you.
The November 29, 2018 meeting of the Woodbridge Board of Education will please come to order. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Bourdain?
Here.
Mr. Della Pietro?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Chambrello?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
And Mr. Treebwasser.
Here. Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meetings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. November 16, 2018, emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted in Avenel Middle School and the Board of Education Administration Building.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Della Pietro, please read the closed session statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempted from the public portion of our meeting. The discussions to be held in closed session will be regarding personnel matters. There will also be an attorney-client discussion related to residency matter. Any information regarding the closed session discussion will be released to the public when the reasons for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exist.
I have a motion by Mr. Della Pietro. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carried. The board will retire to closed session.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Menlo Park Terrace School 19 Chorus is a talented group of 60 4th and 5th grade singers. A select group of them have come to perform tonight under the direction of Mrs. Deborah Bono. They are happy to be performing for you. They will begin their performance with "You Are Our Heroes" by Teresa Jennings. This is a sentiment to honor our veterans, which is the most appropriate for all of us to remember at this time of year and always. A lively holiday partner song called "We're Going on a Sleigh Ride" by Greg Gilpin will follow. Finally, the School 19 Chorus will end their program with the Star Spangled Banner. Thank you.
Our solos to be featured this evening are Madeline Spirino and Michaela Shaughnessy.
Please rise for a salute to the flag and a moment of silence. I'd like to thank school main team, Menlo Park Terrace, and Ms. Bono for an outstanding job. Very good. Do I have a motion to reconvene the meeting? So motion. I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Roll call. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Bourdain?
Here.
Mr. Delapietro?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello? Here. Mr. Velez?
Here.
Mr. Triebwasser?
Here. Will someone make a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
So motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Tamburello. Any corrections or additions? All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record, and any notice of bids received by the board?
Thank you, Mr. President. There were none at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any communications for the, or reports received by the board.
Thank you, Mr. President. On November 20th, we received a notice of hearing from the Woodbridge Township Planning Board regarding various blocks and lots in Woodbridge.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Dr. Zaga, please state for the record the superintendent reports for the month of October.
Mr. President, I have the following reports to present to the board. The student registers and the security and fire drill reports, suspension reports for elementary and secondary schools, bomb threat reports, and the reports of the attendance officers.
Thank you, Dr. Zaga. You want to do it up to your agenda? Or you want to do it now? Do you know what her name is? Yes. Gillian Sims. Go ahead. Dr. Zaga, if you present the student representative, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my pleasure to present to the board Gillian Sims, JFK High School student representative. Gillian played volleyball and softball at Kennedy High School for all 4 years of school and was named junior captain of the softball team in junior year. She's all-conference and all-division softball player. She was listed as one of the top 50 high school softball players in New Jersey in her sophomore year, and last year was named one of the top 50 high school softball pitchers in New Jersey. She's a member of the Student Advisory Board and the Student Council. She volunteers her time with the American Cancer Society. She volunteers with Woodbridge Broncos Pop Warner cheerleading team as an assistant coach. Gillian is planning on attending Rutgers University in the fall, majoring in finance and accounting, with the goal to work on Wall Street. While at Rutgers, she hopes to play for the Newark campus softball team. Ms. Sims?
So, although we're nearly 3 months in, the 2018-2019 school year is shaping up to go down as the best of all my 4 years at JFK due to many improvements and events I and my fellow students have experienced. Right off the bat, student and faculty started the school year comfortably due to the installation of air conditioners in every room thanks to the dedicated members of the PTO. In addition to the AC, the initiative to provide every student with a Chromebook for the school year caused excitement as placed every student on an equal technological playing field no matter their socioeconomic status. I can tell you that I use mine every day in all my classes to take notes, participate in class, do homework, and the ability to access course material online has definitely freed me from lugging around the body weight in my textbooks. The Chromebooks have also afforded students the opportunity to experience an entirely new way of learning. Additionally, JFK held a school-wide testing day providing a free SAT test to all seniors and an ACT or PSAT for all students grades 9 through 11. In September and October, JFK's guidance department has hosted multiple events related to the college planning and application process, both by academically and financially. The presentations allowed parents and students to come together to learn all the ins and outs of finding the right college, detailing application requirements and deadlines, and how to pay for school. Some fun September school spirit events included the fall sports pep rally as a kickoff for a successful season, and of course JFK's senior fall athletes participated in the Running of the Halls tradition held every hosting Friday. Not to be outdone, our annual Student Council sponsored Spirit Week is always a major point of excitement for students. Spirit Week involves themed days ranging from Dress as a Civic Decade Day to Color Wars and concludes with the Field Day, where both faculty and students go head-to-head to see which class comes out on top. This year, class of 2019 won, obviously. As September ended with a bang, October started off with nominations for Homecoming Queen. JFK's process is unlike any other high school in the township, culminating with a final senior class vote. This year's winner was Juliana Impaglia. Also in October, Kennedy hosted a World Language Honor Society induction ceremony for new members and their families and held its annual masquerade dance fundraiser for Project Graduation. The dance is always a big hit and drew a turnout of 450 students. Most recently, JFK invited veterans to speak to selected classes about their service to our country in recognition of Veterans Day, and 2 weeks ago, JFK held its Fall Sports Awards for athletes and their families. At this event, all fall sports athletes are honored, varsity letters are presented, and the winners of special awards such as MVP, MIP, Sportsmanship Award, and Mustang Award are announced. This year, the girls' volleyball team was recognized for winning the White Division undefeated and starting off their season with a tremendous 10-0 record. Lastly, the anticipated events scheduled for December are the annual talent show, the blood drive run by National Honor Society, the Student Council's breakfast with Santa, the parent orientation meeting scheduling for 2019-2020 school year, and the start of the random drug testing program. That's the latest from JFK. Now allow me to tell you about some of our elementary schools. So from Moldy Street, school number 1, grades K through 2 students reviewed fire safety with a visit from the Woodbridge Fire Department. Grade 5 carved pumpkins and then wrote poems about using their 5 senses. Grade 5 students met with Officer Schlossberg to discuss making good choices during School Violence Awareness Week. And from School 18, the Middlesex County Sheriff's Department presented the DARE program every Wednesday to their 5th grade students. Our Assistant Superintendent, Mr. John Bader, escorted their kindergarten classes on a field trip to the fire department on Green Street. They held daily school spirit themes to address kindness, respect, happiness, smiles, and caring during the Week of Respect. They ended the month with a Halloween concert and parade. From Menlo Park Terrace, School 19, grade 2 students organized a sock drive and donated over 150 pairs of socks to the homeless shelter. On October 19th, their students and faculty wore pink to encourage and support to end breast cancer forever. On November 1st, the PTO sponsored the Fall Festival, and they held a Bring a Veteran to breakfast on November 1st. And from Robert Masinek, School 26, they had a kindness assembly for the Week of Respect. Grades K through 3 visited the Island Firehouse, and grades 4 and 5 had an assembly with the fire department at school during Fire Prevention Week. The Grand Falloons from the Middlesex County Clean Communities came to the school to perform and inform students with an Earth Science Assembly. And the Woodbridge Police Department came to talk to the students during School Violence Week. So, yeah, thanks.
Very impressive. You're more than welcome to stay and join us for the rest of this evening, which I'm sure you would find most riveting.
Yeah, I will, because I'm in AP Government too, so it could be
That's great.
good.
You're the first person in 3 years. That's fantastic. I'm glad to have you stay. Mr. Wolferman, would you please state the official election results?
Thank you, Mr. President. The November 6, 2018 Board of Education official winning election results are as follows. Susan Bourdain, 13,274. Daniel Harris, 13,729. And Ezio Tamburello, 12,945.
Thank you, Mr. Wolferman. Dr. Zaga, Superintendent's Agenda, please.
Mr. President, I have 18 items to present to the board.
Do I have a motion for the Superintendent's Agenda?
Motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? One moment. I'd like to recognize that Mr. Mike Salento, the principal of JFK, showed up to support his student, and he was hiding on me before, and I didn't see him. So, Mr. Salento, thank you very much for showing a continued interest in your student success. Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes, Policy and Planning Agenda, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Policy and Planning Committee, on recommendation from the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following 11 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Tamburello. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. President,
Mr. Molnar.
earlier today, we did our resolutions. I'd like to congratulate all the recipients, but also in item number 1, I want to thank the administration for continuing to build on our Veterans Day program. We had a lot of our veterans come out today. We had our Veterans Parade on November 11th in Woodbridge. We had a great crowd, so glad to see the communities really rallying behind our veterans, and it was nice seeing them here tonight, and just to thank you again to the administration for continuing to build on this program.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar. Any other comments or questions from the board?
Mr. President,
Mr. Harris.
I'd like to highlight for the audience and those watching at home, item number 8, something we've been doing for a handful of years now, Hour of Code. It's a program for our K-12 students where we spend at least an hour during the week of December 3rd through the 9th, focusing on the very important subject matter of computer science. That's a nationwide program, so I want to thank Mr. Bader and the rest of the administration for continuing to promote the importance of computer science and the language of coding. We often talk about jobs here and our assistance to our student body in preparing for jobs of the future. Over the next 10 years, this is a job field that's growing faster than the average job, where there's a shortage today, and it's a well-paying middle-class job. So I want to thank again the administration for continuing to push computer science. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes, Curriculum Agenda, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Treebwasser. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, present the following 5 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
We have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Do I have any comments or questions from the board? Comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain? Yes. Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Finance and Insurance, Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 13 items. This evening, I move for the adoption of the foregoing 13 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Delapietro. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
In item number 1, I'll be abstaining on the name Brian Molnar, yes on all other items.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
I will be abstaining on item number 1, in the name of Joseph Velez, yes on all other items.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes. Technology agenda, Mr. Sedana, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Technology Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, present the following 2 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing 2 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Sedana. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Della Pietro. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar.
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes. Buildings and Grounds agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Buildings and Ground Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following. Tonight, I will be moving 1 item.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Do I have any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. President?
Yes, sir, Mr. Harris.
Yes, I do not want to make a comment. I did not sit on this particular committee, but could you, for the audience's education, I noticed we have a number of parents from School 18 with us this evening. Could the administration enlighten us to this, enlighten the public to this item? Sorry to cut you off, guy.
Not a problem, Mr. Harris. This is we hired a land associates to do some work around School 18 to figure out some of our drainage issues along the back wall where the woods is. And we are also looking at remediation for anything that they find. And then after we have a comprehensive report on what it's going to take to remediate or mitigate the problems that exist, then we're going to address them.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mr. Harris. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar.
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes, transportation agenda, Mr. Velez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Transportation Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, present the following 8 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar.
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes. Personnel agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Personnel Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, presents the following. Tonight, I will be moving 38 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar.
On item number 2, I will be abstaining in the name of Janet Service. Yes on all other items.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes. Negotiations agenda, Mr. Velez.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Board of Education Committee for Negotiations present the following 1 item, and I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Tamburello. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public?
Yeah. Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Tamburello, on the merit goals, the number 1 was of particular interest. Did you want to mention that? I didn't want to steal your thunder there.
Expansion of our engineering offerings in the high schools is a merit goal we would like the administration to work on this year. It's something that I know Mr. Harris, Ms. Bourdain, myself heard a lot about over the fall, and I'm sure with board support, everybody agrees that this is a noble endeavor that Mr. or Dr. Zega should be working on, and it involves making sure we expand our engineering offerings in the high school. It's a relatively well-run program in Colonia, I believe. There's some drafting in JFK. Again, it's just expanding those opportunities, and we'd like to see that by the end of the year and certainly implemented, so all you 8th grade parents be on the lookout, certainly implemented by next September. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you, Mr. Treebwasser.
Thank you, Mr. Tamburello. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain,
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro,
I'll be abstaining on item number 1.
Mr. Harris,
I will be abstaining on item number 1.
Mr. Molnar,
I will be abstaining on this agenda item.
Mr. Sedana,
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello,
Yes.
Mr. Velez,
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser.
I will be abstaining on the negotiations agenda. Mr. Bush, do you have any recommendations this evening?
None at this time, Mr. President. Thank you.
Is there any old business to come before the board? Okay, before I go, any new business to come before the board?
Sure. I do have one item.
Mr. Harris?
Yes, Mr. Treebwasser and I collaborated on this. It was brought to our attention that those watching at home, if you ever want to watch a highlights of this meeting, if you will, or any other school program, or there's a video out there that you haven't seen, the Township and TV 35 has changed the way you view school board meetings or any other public meeting. Rather than it being an on-demand app, it's now a YouTube channel. So we just wanted to make note of that, so you could catch your favorite school board meeting or any other program at your leisure, should you miss a meeting or want to catch up on something that you previously missed. So thank you, Mr. Treebwasser, for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other new business? Before I open it up to the public, I just wanted to continue and brief everybody on what's going on in the district as far as our environmental policies and procedures and how we're dealing with things. School 18, we continue to stick to our regiment and our advised policies and procedures as far as testing. As Mr. Harris pointed out, which was stealing some of my thunder, was that we've hired land associates to do a more comprehensive evaluation of the structure of the building at School 18. We will continue to do our testing in the timelines that we've laid out, and when others are brought to our attention due to our new procedures as far as when there is an environmental concern in a school. We are upping our facilities inspections, and we have an individual that we are training to deal with mold and other air quality issues. This individual is being trained through the New York procedures because New York has a standard for those types of conditions that New Jersey currently does not. We are also working on developing a better training program for our staff so that they can better identify what truly is an issue and what is just dirt on a wall. Woodbridge Middle School, there was a parent who brought up a very, very important issue to us regarding bathrooms and the ability for students to be able to use the restroom in a timely manner. We were able to solicit from the municipality a portable restroom that they use for concerts, which really wound up being a great addition to the building, giving the students double the amount of facilities that they had prior. So I'd like to thank that parent, wherever she may be. It was certainly a great thing, and this is part of what makes it work, is when parents do bring things to our attention. Thank you. In keeping with past practice, we will open this portion of the meeting to the statements from the public. If you wish to say something, please come to the microphone, provide your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes in accordance with Regulation 1100D.
Ladies first.
Good evening, everybody, and John retired Woodbridge, 580 Humble Avenue. I'll just be brief and short. Last week, I was at a council meeting, and there was first reading on the two different bonds that should be, one was $220-some-thousand, and one was for just about $8 million. Then I realized it was the same building, which is School 23 in Iselin. And I understand one part of this building is going to be senior citizens, and the other one is going to be, of course, the kindergarten. And to my questioning was that we do lease that property, right? And I believe Woodbridge leases over St. Cecilia's, and they said they're subleasing to school board education. And I guess my question would be, I know how much they're supposed to pay St. Cecilia for the building, And my question is, how much do you pay to Woodbridge municipality for the same facility? And the second part of the question would be about $8 million. They're going to spend, I believe, to renovate the school. And my position was, I said, why do you spend all this money on a school that we're leasing it? We don't own it. And they said, we want us to build a new school. I said, well, I know there's a lot of buildings you could spend less than $8 million. So I guess my question was, how much do we pay, or do we pay any money to the Woodbridge Township downtown for leasing the school as board education?
Mr. Vitaric, I don't know off the top of my head what the lease payment is, but I'm sure that Mr. Wolferman would be happy to email you what our monthly lease payment is.
Well, you don't know how long is the lease either?
It's more, I can't give you an exact number, and again, I will have Mr. Wolferman send you that information.
Well, I mean, you are leasing it for Woodbridge Township.
I understand that.
You are, so, okay. As a landlord myself, I'm mostly at commercial properties. If the tenant is responsible, I mean, the owner is responsible for certain things to be fixed, like roof, sidewalks, properties, things like that. The tenant is only responsible for the interior upgrade of the property. So I guess why do we paying, or you paying, $8 million some dollars to fix the school that probably doesn't want $8 million to begin with?
He's talking about the terms of the lease. I don't know the details.
Mr. Vitaric, I don't know what the terms of the lease are. I mean, it could be one similar to the one that was signed by the garage. I don't know. You'll have to request that information from the business office, and they can certainly give it to you, and then be certainly happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, my question is not, I know the township knows probably how much they get, but you are paying the township.
I understand
You
your question.
sublease it, but you don't know how much.
I have absolutely no idea off the top of my head.
And you don't know for how long.
And Mr. Wolferman can supply you with that data.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Tom Maris, Forge, New Jersey. I'd like to start by congratulating the re-elected council members on being re-elected, and I'm sure that they're going to work just as hard to vindicate the faith that those voters had in them as the voters had in me with their votes. I intend to be here as often as I can and to be as involved as I can, and I'll throw it out again. I'll be glad to help with anybody on the board on any issue. And I'd love to bring my experience in and help you where I can. So that offer stands. Just reach out, and I'll be more than willing to do on any committee or subcommittee that you may have. That said, I have a couple of questions. Last night at the planning board, one of the areas that they were looking at a plan for redevelopment included the parking lot across from the Board of Education, or Ross Street School, if you will. And they cited several instances of concern about safety issues. I'm not going to waste my time because I only have 5 minutes to go into it, but I asked them if they had contacted the school board to tell them their findings. Their answer was they had not. I would ask that the school administration reach out for Martaleski and ask her if there was a problem to please share that with you so you can take corrective action. Something else came up last night, and I don't know if this is true or not, so I'm looking for verification. Is the Board of Education planning on vacating its current headquarters, the BOE offices, at any time in the near future?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Again, it was brought up by some of the people that were in attendance last night. They thought they had seen something in one of the local newspapers that the Board of Education was going to abandon that building and move into the old Ross Street school building. I know, I said the same thing. I said, I'm not aware of it. In fact, I thought that building was actually being treated with some type of historical. I don't know if it's on the Historical Society's list, but...
I don't believe it is, Mr. Maris.
Okay. Well, good. So you're not moving at this point in time.
Not that I'm aware of.
And by the way, that area was pulled, at least the homes on Raw Street and St. James are no longer in the plan, if you will, to go forward with non-condemnation on redevelopment, at least for the time being. If I heard correctly, you're going to keep the on-demand for the school on Channel 35? Or?
Yes, it's still on Channel 35, but there's a YouTube channel rather than the normal app. You know, I I don't know all the technical terms, I apologize, but you'll still be able to watch a school program that's recorded.
Good, because there was something that apparently the township has stopped at June, and you can't pull up anything beyond June on TMV 30 on demand. And in fact, when I had looked for the Board of Education, that had been stopped as well, and they put it back in. So I'm glad you're doing that, because I think it's a great service for the public.
Some kind of, I don't know if somebody forgot or if there was a technical glitch, but I know they were transitioning over to the YouTube channel permanently.
And a little further on the mold and mildew within the schools, we know the major problem. What else has been done as far as investigation within the other schools? Have you hired any outside contractors to look at other schools? If so, which schools and when?
Like I said to you, Mr. Maris, we're sticking to our plan, and we will continue to stick to our plan.
Can you elaborate on that plan?
Not really.
Why not? It's not a matter of public record?
Certainly is, Mr. Maris.
Okay. So if I submit an open request, you can detail that plan?
As always. As always.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Good evening. My name is Christine Gonzalez, Island, New Jersey. Just a couple questions about School 18. When the last mold problem hit, the kindergarten classroom was completely cleaned out, one of them at least. Everything was thrown away. My daughter lost everything in her class. Her blanket from when she was small was thrown away. A bunch of her materials were thrown away, and they were never replaced. So I'm asking if you guys plan on replacing the blankets for their nap time, the things that were sent in by their parents, that were bought by their parents, so that we don't have to keep on paying for new things to have to go into the school since I've already paid for them twice. Is that something that can be done?
If you could just give Ms. Rooney a list of what it is that you're looking for, we certainly can look into that.
Okay.
I don't think I can replace the blanket, though, that you bought your daughter. Maybe get it something similar, but
But that's what I'm saying, at least try to replace what they lost, because there's a lot of things, it's not just the blankets, it's their supplies, it's because everything, their whole
we'll
room
make
was
sure that
totally
they have the
thrown away.
supplies that they need, and if there's things that were thrown out due to the cleaning process, we'll certainly address it.
Okay. And the other thing I was going to ask is, on this proposal, I didn't get up before because I didn't have a chance, but on the proposal about Land Associates that's doing the engineering and architecture, I thought that Aquila was coming in and they were doing all of the grading and that was going to help the problem in the back. So I'm confused why they weren't brought in before Aquila did their work, because now isn't it doing double work? Because if they didn't do the grading properly, then
We're not sure. We just want to verify. We also have that one floor in the back room that seems to be sinking, so that's really, one of the big things that they're looking at. And there's some grading right up against the building that they're going to examine to make sure that that is handled correctly. Mr. Quill does an outstanding job, but he is a landscaper, and we just want to verify that it is done correctly, and if there's additional things that have to be done, we want to identify it before it's a problem. The cooler weather has certainly brought us better conditions, but we want to make sure that we do the things now while the conditions are good to keep it going forward.
Okay. So if it does need to be fixed or whatever the case may be, and these people say, okay, all the grading that you guys did already, it really has to be completely redone because you have to do X, Y, and Z, how are we going to recoup those costs? Because our tax dollars aren't going down, they're going up, and we're spending money that we shouldn't be spending on things because we're not doing proper steps in the procedure. Because as I recall, when I had a meeting with Dr. Zega and another associate, this was already something that was mentioned a long time ago. So why did it take so long for the engineering company to come in before the grading company came in?
The work that Aquila is doing is runoff drains behind the school. What Land is looking at is more technical. They're looking at more structural things that are affecting the actual building itself. I don't think it's going to have anything to do with what Mr. Aquila has done. I don't think it's going to have anything to do with the trees being pulled back. These are things that are strictly structural.
Have you guys identified the source yet?
Nobody's found anything yet, so we're going to continue to look.
Okay, and then some of
the source may just be that it's got a very, very high water table and we had an extensive amount of rain. I don't know.
Well, the front of the building was the initial problem, so obviously that source was found, which was the roof. But the back of the building, I mean, both my kids are back there. One of my daughters was extremely sick for 90% of the school year. So I really don't want the same thing happening to her again in the spring. because she's been extremely ill. So I want to know what your guys' plan is, because I'm sure, like all of you guys have children, you want your kids to be safe and to be healthy. I'd like the same thing for my daughter, but my daughter's been extremely sick, hospitalized multiple times. So I want to know what the plan is for the spring before the spring happens and we have this problem all over again.
And that's why we are sticking to the plan. We will continue to stick to it. We will continue to investigate things that we believe to be a problem. And if we find problems, we will fix them. And if we don't find problems, then we're going to keep looking until we do.
And what company is doing the CO2 testing? Because there wasn't any report. It was just numbers that were given in an email.
I believe it was done. It's by the gentleman that we're training to do more indoor air quality exams. He's a gentleman I brought up earlier that's going to New York for getting certification for dealing with certain things.
But he's not certified yet, is he?
No, ma'am.
So then who's going to look at those numbers and say that they're okay? Because I know that the email said they're okay, but there were 2 or 3 of those numbers that were quite high.
Here is still our consultant on record, and they review things.
Okay, but they also messed up everything last year. So.
I don't agree with that, but that's your
And that's
perspective.
fine, you don't have to agree with it. But we had so many problems because the Hera didn't do their job correctly. So what is the plan moving forward to review those results? Because you're saying that they reviewed them. There's 3 of those results that are on the higher side, one of them way too high. So what is the plan for those results?
I will touch base with it here and find out what they have to say, and if they are not capable of doing the correct thing, then we'll look for somebody else. But we have now been through 5 different companies. And all of the companies seem to be telling us that what we're doing is the correct thing, including the company that the parents hired to review the things.
I know, I spoke with Mark in detail about everything that's going on, and he instructed me to take my child out of the school. So clearly you guys aren't talking to them on the same basis that everybody else is, because my daughter's been so ill, and he reviewed the results from the last thing on a personal basis for me. And he told me to remove my child from that school, which I'm not going to do because it's not fair to her that she has to move to another school and have all of those new things. My question to you guys is, what is the plan if Hera is not going to do what they said they're going to do, which has been going on since this all started back in January?
There are separate issues with what was going on in January and then what came up in the spring. They were not the same event. And they dealt with the first event, and we addressed it, and we will deal with the second one, and we will continue to address it. Everything that Hera did in the spring, we were told was being done correctly. So we're going to continue to stay with, no, by the other people that we had hired as well. So we're going to continue to stick to our plan.
Brian Jeffroy, President WTEA. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the 3 incumbent board members on your election. Congratulations. Second, I'd just like to take a minute to recognize the faculty, staff, and administrators who went above and beyond on November 15th to make sure our students were safe. It was quite difficult for our buses to get around to pick the kids up. Some of the elementary students, I think it was close to 7 o'clock by the time they got home because how bad all the roads were. So, you know, it was really impressive. Our elementary, particularly, were the latest. The administrators, the faculty, and staff stayed with those students, made sure they were safe, and our bus drivers navigating around the streets. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, Dan Grossberg, Island. So, Dr. Zaga, on Monday, November 5th, you had sent an email stating that the efforts put forth have had a positive effect on the mold issue. Cited as evidence of that was there was absence of visible mold in any classrooms. And while I'd love to join you in this excitement, I worry that we might be celebrating a little bit too early. And here's why. And a lot of the issues were already covered by one of the other parents. But as you guys know, everybody knows, mold does not appear overnight. And it's been said all along that it's a mold issue, but cleaning the mold will not remove it, because when the conditions are optimal, I'm not telling you guys anything new, it'll start growing again. The issue, which is a plan put in place that you have outlined, is ventilation, humidity, and cleaning. I'm curious about the ventilation that we have put forth and whether it's put in all the rooms or if it's only a certain section of the school itself. Now, since your victory email, there have been some tests done checking for mold in the air, mostly in rooms that did not have issues previously, especially the wing where most of the rooms were shut down for remediation. There had been no tests done in those rooms yet again. So how can we be sure that the cleaning and the remediation that was done was actually effective? Is it because we don't see any mold right there today? I mean, obviously, if you clean right away, you're not going to see anything. But still, I don't know, logically to me, it makes sense to clean those same areas that were cleaned. Now, since your November 5th email, the one air quality test that was done, where you spoke about the elevated levels of CO2, 2 were called out in that email saying that they were elevated, but when you look at the numbers, there were a number of others of rooms that were very high as well. Some just below the 1,000 point, but 3 additional rooms were above 900, which is really close. And I'm curious about those rooms that were tested too. So it's a small subsample of the entire school. I was curious if you're doing indoor air quality for the rest of the school as well. And again, establishing a baseline, retesting those to see if it's improved. Now, there's still an issue of finding the source of the moisture. As Mr. Treebosser pointed out, it has not been found yet. I'm curious about the investigation that you said is still ongoing and what that actually entails. Is it just looking for visible mold? Is it the hiring of land associates now? You said they're doing structural work. But is there any other formal investigation, or what are the things that you guys are doing to find the source of the mold? Now, with the cooler weather, it's expected that we have lower humidity now. But what happens in the warmer months when spring and summer hit? We have conditions that were similar to the earlier school year, where we had the mold issues crop up quite fast. So I would say, like, if at that point we still have no mold and things are looking good, I'd be happy to pop some sparkling apple cider and celebrate with you guys, but I really don't think we're anywhere close to that point just yet. And I really, want to be hopeful that we are moving in the right direction. So yeah, if you could elaborate on what kind of investigating is being done to find the source, that would be helpful. And also just one comment, at the last meeting, Mr. Treebosser, you had mentioned that the tests had to be done after hours because of POSHA, that you can't tell the state when they could come into the school. But AHIRA did the tests, correct? So it wasn't POSHA?
AHIRA did the test, but I believe they were recommended to take them by POSH.
I'm sorry?
I said I believe they were recommended by POSH when to take the test.
They were recommended by POSHA?
I believe, yes.
Okay, but all right, so maybe for the record, we just correct that.
No problem.
Thank you.
One other thing, I don't believe Dr. Zega's email was supposed to be a celebratory email. I think it was more to be informative. And also regarding Aquila, from what I understand, that they have not started doing it yet. They're waiting till after land finishes doing the pilot holes to find out what's going on. So to answer your question regarding being wasteful, the Aquila was put off on hold on that and has not done the back of the building yet.
Okay. And the investigation, that's part of land too, or what?
Yes, sir.
Is that it?
That's part of it.
Okay. Can you elaborate on the other parts?
We're going to continue to do what we have been. We're checking this roof, the void between the ceiling and the roof where we can, to make sure that there's no signs of water leaks. We're checking in the drains to make sure that everything's draining properly and pulling it away from the building. It's not just one thing.
Of course. That's why I asked. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir, Mr. Molnar.
I'm glad you kind of touched on the email from Dr. Zega. I mean, this isn't a football game. This game is never going to end. Hopefully, we're going to get to the point where there's just going to be no more mold, and then we just have normalcy. We're never going to get to a point where we're finally going to say, hey, guys, this is it. It's over. We won. This isn't about winning and losing. This is about doing what we can to give our children a safe environment in a building. So I don't think there's anything on the board like we're here to win a football game. There's nothing to do with that. We're going to try to continue to do everything. I mean, I wish this whole issue was as easy as finding a loaf of moldy bread in a closet saying, here, we got the source. But, I mean, the evidence seems to be pointing towards environmental, and I think it is a big step with land coming in, because we're going to have to dig down. It could be that the water table and the way the woods and the way the wetlands are there, because they are wetlands, that, the foundation might be getting saturated. And then it's like your basement. When the walls around your basement get saturated and there's a lot of water, that's when you get the moisture in your house, and that's when you get mold and mildew, in your house. That's why people have, your little, humidifiers that that you put in there to get the water out of the air. So we are going to continue to do everything, and I know it's frustrating for the parents, and believe me, but I wish it was something as simple as saying it was caused by this. It's like going to the doctor. You could go to the doctor with the pain in your back. It could be a million things. It could be something as simple as a muscle. It could be something devastating like cancer. Doctors do tests. And you go to step 1, you got to go to step 2, you try to go to step 3. So, I mean, believe me, I know the frustration the parents are having. And believe me, we would like to talk about, about different things at School 18 going on, than this. But, and I understand there's a non-trust towards O'Hara, and we're going to come up here and we're going to read a number, and if it's by O'Hara, then it's going to be, it's no good. And I get that, but like I said, we will continue, as Mr. Treebosser said, to do everything we can to find what the source of it is.
My name is Zohair Najam, 67 Grand Street, Isla, New Jersey. I'd just like to start off by saying thank you to Mr. Bader. He came out to our AP government class and he solved a lot of the issues in the Chromebooks we brought up a couple weeks ago. I just wanted to bring up another issue involving Muslim holidays. For the past year, I'm a junior in John F. Kennedy High School. For the past years, I've been having to go to school during my holidays, and I've had some issues with absences and etc. whenever I have a holiday. And I'd just like to propose that, if not by the time I graduate, but just for future years, that for Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr, which are both Muslim holidays that often occur throughout the school year, this year it's going to be June 2nd or June 3rd, that we have a day off for Muslims, just the same way we gave a day off for Diwali and among other holidays, so just for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, you said you were charged absentee for taking off for religious purposes?
I believe one year I had a problem with that. I came in late for a religious prayer, and it was not excused. I just came in and I got late for it.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can have that affixed on your record.
Yeah, thank you.
If you, just for future sake, for you and anybody who comes, who's in your situation, for any person who has a firmly held religious belief, if they have any detriment on their record, whether it be a late or a absence, that's something that if you speak to your principal or your school administration about, that should never, ever be on your record. So just to be very clear,
Thank you.
It would be an excused absence, and you'd still have to make up the work, but not during the day of your religious holiday.
Yes. I just was proposing just in the future for a day off, just as there is a good amount of Muslim Americans, as you probably are aware of. There is a Sunday school in Islam Middle School, for example, which a lot of Woodbridge Township school students do attend. And I just believe as the Muslim population in Woodbridge, New Jersey continues to increase, we do have a mosque in Forge, New Jersey. As the population continues to increase, I think that it'd be practical to hold a day off as well in the future.
That's just to separate. That's a different issue. You know that, right? That's a different, because that's the school calendar, and that's certainly within the discretion of the Board of Education. They have to weigh all these decisions and still get at least 180, and maybe more. I don't know what your contract says for your 182-day calendar in. That's separate. But with respect to a Muslim, Jewish, Christian, any holiday, if there's ever a penalty at all for your or anybody else's observance of that holiday, that's something you need to bring to the administration's attention immediately, because that would be rectified.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Treebosser?
Yes, sir, Mr. Harris.
I just wanted to respond to you as well. I'm the chair of the Policy and Planning Committee, and Dr. Zega has put together a series of different school calendars. Believe it or not, it's actually pretty difficult to get the 180 days in between September and August. But that Eid Fitr, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, is part of a consideration of different holidays that we're considering for future calendars. It's there's many holidays to consider. That's certainly one of the ones that actually the Mosque and Fords did bring to AJ and Mr. Sedana and I's attention this past summer, I believe it was. So that is part of the conversation. So, thank you,
Mr. Harris. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello, second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.